So, where did we finish the last episode? Oh yeah, by a little nice pond, relaxing and everything. Unfortunately, we don't have all day, and there is plenty still to visit. And when I say plenty, oh, prepare. We are going today to finish the Pentapolitana, the 3 last cities we are going to visit. Plus, there's gonna be maybe a castle or even a little church town. But let's take it step by step. First, we continue our trip of the Pentapolitana cities. Now it's time for the 3rd. Welcome to Prešov. Actually, there's a really cool way to for English speakers to remember the name of the city. Here it is, Prešov. Works pretty fine, right? Anyway, unfortunately, we have only 1 day here, and I'm telling you about it because it's definitely not enough. It's one of those inexplicable things that, I mean, it's just another town really, but we're having a very good feel about it. So 1 day here is definitely not enough, but mind you, even in 1 day you can visit plenty. So let me show off some places we managed to visit. Before we start proper sightseeing, let me tell you about something we've been seeing in many a Slovak town. They're basically empty. So we're talking about the city here, which is after Bratislava and Košice, 3rd biggest in the country, 100,000 inhabitants. It's a weekday, 9:30 a.m., 1st of September, the first day of school. We were convinced streets will be full of people, and they're empty. I actually felt like entering a set of a zombie movie. 28 days later, it's empty, and there's gonna be the hordes running at me at any moment. Fortunately, that's not the case. There are no zombies, but actual people, which is a huge relief. So, relieved? Let's start proper sightseeing, and actually we're gonna start with something that I cannot show you. The main reason why we came here is a place called Solivar. For hundreds of years outside town, today part of the city, this is a place where they mine salt, and this is the main building of Solivar, unfortunately closed for visitors as there was some kind of a wedding or something. So we decided to skip the whole story of salt. It's a bit of a pity as it is white gold, but fortunately there were plenty of other places that made up for this disappointment. In Bardejov we found the Suburbium Judeorum, and here is a little map of the one in Prešov. So the map we're gonna see better in a moment, but here's the thing. Unlike in Bardejov, the place was opened, so we could simply enter the suburb. And you can already kind of see it's a closed circuit. So let's have the map again. We've got 6 important institutions, 2 synagogues, a butcher shop, slaughterhouse, rabbi's house, and a school. You can see they kind of create a closed circuit, kind of a little fortress, you may say. So there are no walls there today, but for example, look at the building in front of you now. Doesn't it look like a tower actually? So my guess is there used to be a wall around it, and if there were any issues, this is a place where you can defend the most important institutions. I found no information, but this is my intuition telling me so. When it comes to the 6 buildings, we've seen the school, and here's the Orthodox synagogue again. Unfortunately, the other one did not survive, and unfortunately, this one was closed, but we found a photo of how it looks like inside. So pretty neat. And there are also some other buildings, and I think there's actually some Jewish life going on in Prešov, judging by the cars standing on the parking lot. Last little detail, it may be wine that's more important than Jewish tradition, but here's plenty of wild hops growing all around. And both topics are actually going to come back later on. So with all the hops, let's hop to the main market square. And there you have a building, the beautiful Renaissance Attica. It's actually a place where many important things would happen, as it belonged to the famous Rakoczy family. So here is some info and some important names like the Ferenc Rakoczy that is buried in Košice. He lived here as well. Anyway, Today there's still a lot going on because this is the main city museum. So let's jump in, and well, what you're gonna have is your typical museum with all the things they could gather. Sounds boring? Oh no! This is the place where they have a lot of information about opal, which was so useful in the previous episode. But also a topic that honestly I would never really go into on my own. So the story of the fire brigade in Slovakia. And not only plenty of info and photos, but also plenty of some old school gear. And some of it we would not associate with the fire brigade today anymore, right? Also, you are going to see Saint Florian, the holy patron of the fire brigade, with Freddie Mercury moustache. And the highlight of it all, they have a separate place for all the old school fire brigade. Well, not even cars. Some of them are wagons from late 19th century. And plenty of kids, when they're like 3 or 4, they want to be firemen. I actually never wanted to be one, but still, this is a place which was kind of jaw-dropping, honestly. And I liked it. Victoria loved it. So she decided to simply join the fire brigade, as you can see here. And not only on photos, she is ready to roll and save lives. But my favorite part was the exhibition about chipkas. And mind you, there were plenty of chipkas everywhere. Basically, the wives of salt miners were preparing chipkas to sell them at the main market square of Prešov. And for example, the gentleman here was helping those ladies sell their chipkas. Now you're thinking, why am I so excited? Well, chipka in Slovak is lace. Doesn't sound like much, but that's not the point. This is a false friend. In Polish, chipka isn't lace. It means literally pussy. And I don't mean like cats, I mean like vagina. So this is the best false friend between Polish and Slovak. And there are plenty of examples, but this is one of my favorites. So this is our dose of infantilism today. It is linguistic. There is also a good example of a false friend between Slovak and English. This is not anybody being horny. This means simply upper. It is time though to leave this unexpectedly interesting museum. So let me just show you one extra detail, a photo of the building from 100 years ago. And let's jump across the street because there's another very interesting detail. So as always, you're gonna have the main Catholic church in the center. But very often in Eastern Slovakia, next to the Catholic Church, you're going to have the main evangelical church. And this is it exactly. Now I mentioned in Bardejov that back in the day, if evangelicals were taking over Catholic churches, very often first thing they do is to get rid of all the imagery. So here, have a look. You are going to have the altar at the very end, yes, but then that's it. There are no images, no paintings or sculptures. It actually looks more like an opera or a theater. And now for comparison, the main Catholic church. Now it's not overflowing with Baroque, as very often is the case. It is pretty simple, to be honest, but you do have a big altar at the end and some images on the sides. So this is pretty much in a pill the difference between Catholic and evangelical churches. But let's leave them now. It is time for a bloody story. The most famous thing that happened here is rather gruesome. So you've got the 80s of the 17th century, another rebellion against the Habsburgs here, and the Imperial Army starts sieging Prešov, which happily joined the rebellion. Prešov noticed they have no chance, so they decided to negotiate, and in the end they managed to negotiate a pretty good deal that the Imperial Army will enter, but they will leave the city in peace. So that's the theory. Practice is the generals of the Imperial Army did not feel like doing it, so when they entered, Vienna started sending for help, and a guy called Carafa came all the way from Naples. When he arrived here, late 86, he closed the city and the witch hunt began. Mind you, we're talking about some nobles here. We're talking about the most important people in the city. And beginning of 87, something today known as the Prešov massacre began. In the end, 24 people were sentenced to death, but Carafa was very creative. So most of them, their arms were chopped off, one arm was chopped off, and then the head then was nailed to the city gates. Some were smart. Seeing what happens, one guy at least committed suicide. Of course, many of them were tortured before. Anyway, it's something that will happen in other places, but never to such extent and to so important people and in such brutal way. So it was never forgotten and then went down in history as the Prešov massacre, still remembered, and we are now in the very place where the whole thing would happen. Not in one day, in several months, but that's the very spot. So here, another cool old photo of the same spot. And when it comes to Carafa, he wasn't forgotten. There is a place called Caravka. So officially this building is a prison where people, before being tortured, beheaded and so on, were imprisoned. And here you've got an image commemorating it. There is actually a sculpture, and I have to say, comparing to Bardejov, one thing they still got wrong, but at least another thing they got right. So still, the face is covered, that's wrong, but no axe, he has a sword in his hand, that's right. But I think you will agree with me that after such a gruesome story, we need to unwind a bit. So in front of you is a beautiful building of the city hall. But as you enter the tunnel here, to your left, you are going to see something called Wine Museum. So that's a great story to change the ambience. But I think it's best if the place is introduced not by me, but by somebody else.
Vzácni hostia, milí priatelia dobrého vína, srdečne vás privítam v Prešove, v týchto historických pivniciach pod Mestskou radnicou, kde už takmer 30 rokov otváram svet vína pre každého, kto má záujem spoznať dobré víno, zdravé víno a víno, ktoré vás poteší. Múzeum vín má v svojej kolekcii viac ako 2500 druhov vín z celého sveta, každý rok sa doplňajú nové a nové vína. Je tu nádherný priestor spoznať víno, naučiť sa rozumieť vínu, budete srdečne vítaní.
Oh, me and Vicky, we are friends of wine and we did feel very welcome here. Now the gentleman is another person that we met here who devotes his life to a passion. So we got a very nice tour of the cellars, and as you can see there are plenty of bottles here. Not only, of course, we had the basics on how wine is prepared with some old school tools, but in the end for us the most important bit are local wines. Hence, you've got a map here with 6 wine regions. We only missed numbers 2 and 4. Here's Eastern Slovakia itself, with where wine is grown, the most famous of course being Tokaj. Here you have photos of 3 particular Tokaj grapes, but supposedly there are more than 10 endemic Slovak grapes now. Maybe most important detail as practical is this: look for those 3 letters, they are the denomination of Slovak wine, they guarantee the quality. Now, we don't simply trust letters, so we decided, as it's not exactly a museum, it's actually a shop, to get a couple of bottles. And we paid, of course, because look what happens when you don't. There was a client who didn't pay for those bottles, and he is still here in the cellar. Fortunately, we are allowed to leave, and next thing we stumble upon is the Burčak Fest. So basically when you start fermenting the must, after several days, you can take out this kind of slightly fermented grape juice. That's Burčak here. Supposedly Czechs and Slovaks drink it between August and November like crazy. It was very nice, but beer is also very nice. And remember, in the Jewish suburb we already had plenty of wild hops. Well, in Prešov they also do something about it. I think now you understand why we liked Prešov so much. So, slightly sad, but with some good wine in the car, we leave Prešov, as there's still plenty to see. And just kind of a stone's throw up north, there's another very interesting spot. Our 4th Pentapolitana town. We are in Sabinov now, and mind you, it is by far the smallest of the 5 today, only 12,000 inhabitants, so I guess not many more than in the good old days. And it's definitely not touristic. The best way to see it, usually the main street is off limits to cars, or the traffic is limited. Here it isn't. It's simply a road, and there's plenty of traffic. You'll see it, you'll hear it probably, but we're not here for the good old days. We're here for unexpected Hollywood. In the 60s they made here a film called Obchod na Korsu, or The Shop on Main Street, and it's the only Czechoslovak film to ever get an Oscar. So we're gonna walk around, see some places from the film, and I'll tell you a bit about what the film is about. It is Second World War, one of those days the fascist state of Tiso introduces Aryanization, so every Jewish business needs to have an Aryan manager. And in a random Slovak town you have Anton Brdko. Everybody calls him Tono, and he becomes a manager of a Jewish shop of a widow Lautmanova selling basic sewing utensils. He thinks it's gonna change his life, and actually it did, but not the way he thought. I'm not gonna spoil anymore, but there you have the shop in the background, and this is Tono himself. So most of the film was shot here in Sabinov. Basically, when you walk around the main square, you will see those buildings in the film. And I have to say, the film is from the 60s, but it aged pretty well. So I do recommend watching it, and I am going to leave you a link in the description. The film is in parts, but it's very easy to follow it. You have subtitles in English. Do watch it. But now I'm gonna show you a couple of the scenes with the particular places where they were shot. So now we are in the main street. There's pretty much nothing here, just a little monument, and in the film you had here a huge Hlinka pyramid. The first moments of the film, you have the entrance to the city hall, and this is the entrance to the city hall today. But the most impressive one, this is the Hlinka guard walking, and now same place today. I think this needs no commenting anymore. One more photo from the film, from the shop itself, and here is the shop now. There is something called Hollywood tourism, so now it pretty much acts as the main souvenir shop, and I'm pretty sure it is making better profit today than the shop of widow Lautmanova did in the film. And to be honest, that was pretty much our idea for Sabinov. A bit of Hollywood tourism and continuing on. But we thought, well, we are there already, why not walk around? And that kind of happens sometimes. You come for one thing, but something else becomes the highlight. So while walking, we ended up in this just normal district where people live. Well, it's not exactly normal. They do live in houses, yes, but in the gardens they have a little interesting detail. They have 14th, 15th, 16th century towers from the old fortifications of the city. Now, how cool is that? You actually have medieval fortification inside your garden. Mind you, we've had some live Gothic in the beautiful church back in Bardejov, but this was the unexpected live Gothic right there in Sabinov. And there's quite a lot of towers, quite a bit of the wall is still there, and I think some of the towers are actually used as some kind of attics or storerooms or something. Anyway, I can tell you one thing, if I win the lottery, I am going to buy a house here. I want to live next to a medieval wall. Thank you very much. Now, talking about the old times, you've got the main street today, the main street more than 100 years ago. And let me show you again the city hall, and the same city hall roughly 80 years ago. So there are plenty of interesting details around Sabinov if you look. Not enough, there was also plenty of info about cycling, another topic you wouldn't really get into on your own, I guess. And there was a very curious piece of information. You had Jan Kolar in episode 11, the main ideological enemy of Ludovit the one who wrote the Slavic Bible, the daughter of Slava. Ironically, It is a German girl who became an inspiration for the female personification of ancient Slavdom, one may say. He studied in Jena in Germany and fell in love with a daughter of a local pastor. Well, not really local. She lived out of Jena more than 6 kilometers. So in order to see her as soon as possible, he started using a bike, becoming pretty much the first official Slovak cyclist. He actually wrote a poem praising how amazing bikes are, how they help to connect love. And as you can see, bikes are amazing for some modern Slovaks as well. Well, we don't have bikes, but we do have 4 wheels, so it is time to leave nice little Sabino, and we're gonna enter a new region, the famous Spiš. So we're gonna start with, I think, the official highlight of the region, the Great Spiš Castle. When I say great, you can actually see it a good 15 kilometers before you arrive, not simply because it's on a hill, it is huge. So we thought, a very popular place, we're not gonna go to the main parking spot, we're gonna find the one, let's call it, in the back. And as you can see, good thinking, plenty of space, and the hill does not look like much. And then you start walking, and you keep walking, and you walk still some more, and in the end, it turns out it took us more than 40 minutes. The hill is slightly deceiving, and then you come to the main place, and it turns out everything is closed for visitors because of renovation, so that's deceiving as well. Fortunately, it doesn't affect the views, and we're gonna go there in a moment. But to be honest, although it was disappointing that the castle was closed, even closed, just looking at the walls from the outside, it is an impressive view. But still more impressive, you go down to a place which was kind of a little town right at the castle, mostly for people working for it, but it counts as a castle because it is behind the walls. So first of all, it is officially one of the biggest castles in Central Europe. I think it's 25 hectares, although to be honest, hectares tell me nothing. What's telling me way more, you can see, I think, 40-50 kilometers. Well, we cannot see in a circle because we're not at the top of the castle, but imagine you are there. You would see it perfectly, the whole region, 360 degrees around you in many, many kilometers. But, well, it's all closed. So we're leaving and we're gonna visit. As you can see, there's another wall. We're gonna visit a place behind it called Spišská Kapituła. There were plenty of micro towns owned by the clergy, the most famous example today being the Vatican. But there used to be many more, and Spišská Kapituła is such an example. First of all, look at the very interesting spatial relationship you've got in the background, the castle, right? So look at the relationship between, let's call it, spiritual and earthly power. They are separate, but they are right next to each other. So that's a very interesting detail. But also, more important, until 1950, Spišská Kapituła was officially a separate town. I think it never grew to be more than 600 people, but that's not important. The important is, this is Slovak Vatican. The highlight today is the most important church of the town, and you can see a beautiful Romanesque facade. There are very few such facades in Slovakia today. It is mostly Gothic if it's old, and mind you, you want to enter, that's the key. This is not a museum object, they actually use it. Now, officially, it is not allowed to make videos inside, so I kind of permitted myself to do just a little bit. But anyway, the important thing, it's a huge mishmash inside. You have early Gothic polychromy, you've got late Gothic sarcophagi, you've got some Baroque panoplia with the coats of arms of the most important Hungarian aristocrats of the time, and some modernity. This is to call Batman in case of emergency. So it was alright, but to be honest, it is just another Gothic church. So why is it on the UNESCO list? Well, actually, what's on the UNESCO list is not the church, nor the castle itself, it's the whole, let's call it, ensemble. the spatial division between the spiritual and the earthly and their relation of almost 1,000 years, that's what's on the UNESCO list. And actually there's one thing more. As very often happens, if you want the highlight, don't look for the big things, look for the small things. There's a village called Žehra, and this is the village church, nicely on a hill as well, and it may look baroque, but it goes back all the way to the Romanesque times. Of course, the villagers were not allowed to go to the main church that we saw a moment ago, so each village around would have its own little church. And the first thing that you see when you enter here, interesting detail. The pillar here, one pillar in the middle, looks kind of like a palm tree. It holds the whole weight of the roof of the church, so that's interesting. But then you start looking around and you have beautiful early Gothic polychromies. I think many people seeing something like that would think of an Orthodox church, but if it's a small Roman Catholic church, it will have polychromies because they didn't have space, probably the money, to have altars and sculptures and so on and so forth. So back in the day, also many Roman Catholic churches looked like that. But of course, later, with time, with the ages passing, the churches were expanded, and if not, all of it was painted over. So usually, such things, such polychromies, just got destroyed. Fortunately here, under all the layers of, let's call it, modernity, they survived in perfect condition. So everything was scraped in the 20th century, it was scraped away, and now we are back to Gothic. So another very good example of live Gothic here for you, another good example of a time machine, and especially the polychromies here on the roof of the presbytery are absolutely brilliant. So it wasn't the huge castle, nor the Slovak Vatican that were our highlights of the visit here. But now, just one last place missing.
It is time to finish our little round of the Pentapolitana cities with the last one, with Levoča. When we were in Sabinov, I said it's by far the smallest of the 5 Pentapolitana towns. Not true. Levoča is only 14,000 people. I had no idea why I thought it's much bigger. Well, it isn't. It's super small. And that means it hasn't really changed in terms of population, because actually I found no information, but I guess it used to be between 3,000 to 5,000 people, no more. And now it's 14, so it's pretty much the same for several hundred years. And that may be another reason why it's on the UNESCO list. It has not changed. But today Levoča is famous for one place and one person, Master Pole. So let's get into details about that interesting gentleman.
Let's start with the fact that we actually don't know much about him. If there were any information, they burned with the archives in 1550, where unfortunately Levoča tended to burn in the modern times as well, as you can see on the photos here. So we don't even know his surname, nickname, or where he was from. There are many different theories. Maybe he was from modern Slovakia, or somewhere in Germany, maybe Austria, or even northern Italy. What we know is that he came to Levoča beginning of the 16th century as a grown man already. Now in front of you is one of the symbols of the power of the city, a beautiful Renaissance city hall. And it is 15th, 16th century, the golden age of Levoča. They have enough money to bring an important sculptor. So Master Paul came and he lived here for more than 30 years, so we call him Master Paul of Levoča. And for the main church, he created his most impressive work, the main altar, which I cannot show you properly because you cannot take photos or make videos inside, so I have to use this photo of the internet. Fortunately, in his old workshop, in his old home, there's a museum today, and they did something very simple and ingenious at the same time. They made replicas in gypsum of many of the details from the altar, and they made it 1-to-1. So
It's not only that you cannot take photos in the church, you cannot get close to the altar, you don't see many of the details. Well, no big deal, you can see them here. You can literally be a centimeter away from it, which is fantastic. I think the most important or impressive piece is from the predella of the altar, the Last Supper. So you've got the apostles here around the table. Now concentrate on all the details. Look at their faces, at their expressions. Look at the hair. Look at the clothes. Everything's in minute detail. Even such things that I think nobody ever saw for hundreds of years. The feet. Look at their toes. It's all there, including the folds on the tablecloth. One may say it is ultra realistic. And there is one school by late 15th century that's known for that, Nuremberg school. Nuremberg being the city in southern Germany, and that's why one of the theories says Master Paul originates from southern Germany, from somewhere around Nuremberg itself. But there is another theory. Not far from Lewocha is the city of Kraków, and by late 15th century we did have an artist there called Weitstoss from Nuremberg. And also the Guild of Sculptors already existed, so most probably Master Paul, still not master yet, was a student of Weitstoss himself in Kraków, and then he translated the style to Lewocha. If you come to Kraków, one of the main highlights of the city is the main altar of the main church. It's the work of Weitstoss, and they're pretty much the same style. But there were other artists. So what makes people say Master Paul was student of Weitstoss? Stoss was famous for something called almond eyes, and that particular shape you will find in the works of Master Paul as well. Other particularities of the style was, let's call it, showing extreme exaggerated emotion and also extreme exaggerated suffering. All in all, I have to say the altar of Master Paul is an absolute masterpiece. Plus, he would foresee the future. So you've got here apostles sent around the world, and Frodo and Sam are going off with the ring. So Master Paul foresaw Tolkien 500 years before Tolkien. Not only Frodo and Sam though, he also included himself. Here is one of the apostles wearing a very particular hat. That's a hat worn by the sculptors of the time. And I could go on and on and on about it. So let me just show you a photo of the absolute masterpiece by him and a bit of obligatory museum infantilism. Here's the Goblin Explorer. Welcome to the new episode about Slovakia. Oi, did you hear that? There's a new episode about Slovakia. Oh my god, again? Well, gotta watch it. I don't want any more, it's boring. Hey, listen, I'm not gonna watch anymore. God, please, let him stop with Slovakia already. So, as a wake-up call, a little statistic. 18.5 meters tall. The altar is officially the tallest Gothic altar in Europe. And thanks to those people here, we can see it today in perfect condition. But maybe the best way to see its importance, the old 100 Slovak crowns, City Hall of Lewocha one side, a detail from the altar by Master Paul on the other.
So here's another stupid legend. For many people, it is not Master Paul and his great works that are the symbol of the city, but a so-called White Lady of Lewocha. So the story goes, it is the time of the uprising of the Rakoczy, and here's Julia. When the imperial army came to siege the city, she was in love with the commander of the army, and she decided to help them. She found some plans, either of the fortifications or of the meeting places of the leaders of the uprising. Anyway, she became a traitor. She let the imperial army take the city. So when finally the uprising ended, people in Lewocha did not forget it. And 1714 she was beheaded for treason. But people say because she did it out of love, her soul could not leave our world until the very day, now as a
White Lady of Levoča. Every night she roams the city streets still. Maybe that's why 8 p.m. Levoča is pretty much empty. Of course, it's complete BS. What happened in reality? City Council itself decided there's no point in fighting, as the Imperial Army was too big, and after negotiations they let the Imperials in. That's it. There's no story here. And maybe that's why, because there's actually no story to tell, something had to be invented. And poor Julia, who is actually supposedly an historical figure, was blamed for everything. And now there's a good story to sell, and I think it kind of works. Half of the places here are the White Lady of Levoča places. So I think it's best to go back to actual history, not legends, especially that there's one extra very interesting detail. So it is late 15th century. When we were in Košice, I told you in the underground museum about the fight between the Jagiellonian brothers. John Albert, a prince, wants to claim the crown from Ladislaus, his brother, who was the king of Czechia and Hungary. He lost, he went back to Poland, and then he became king. So 1494, the Jagiellonian brothers thought they already have some crowns each, why not meet and settle the differences? So they did, and not only those two, but also their little brother, who today we call in Polish history Sigismundus the Old, then he was young, and the fourth brother, Cardinal of the Roman Catholic Church. They met here in Levoča to settle things and think about important issues, how for example to repel the Ottoman Empire. It may be a little detail, but you have a meeting of kings here. And if that's not enough, Levoča was the capital of the whole region of Spiš as well. In the meantime, I guess you noticed there's also plenty of fortification system left. Now in Sabino, I told you I would love to live in a place right next to a wall, right? Well, I have to say, Levoča actually topped it. They do not have houses next to walls. They have houses in the walls, in the very towers themselves. And if that's not enough, some people actually have a garden in an old moat, which is absolutely brilliant. And also, if not a garden next to a house, they have those little weekend gardens in the moat with some fruit and some animals, which is also super cute. Now you may start laughing that there are goats in the city, but until recently Levoča was the center of trade for the whole region. So not only people from the city, but all the highlanders would go there to trade, for example, with animals. And fortunately we have plenty of photos from the time, plus artists of the time also found it very interesting. But of course you also had proper, so to speak, city dwellers, and even some important aristocratic families would build tenement houses. That's the most beautiful one, and again a photo of the same place from more than 100 years ago. But my favorite photo of something very simple. Here's a courtyard, but here is the same courtyard, and it actually looks like some special effects, right? One extra photo of the Levoča synagogue. Unfortunately, it's only that. Today you go to that place and you've got a modern school, and there is only one small plaque reminding you there used to be something else. In the meantime, it got dark, and we stumbled upon a little concert in the center of the town. So do not expect plenty of people, but there was something happening, which is great. And think of it like this: quality over quantity. Not too many people, but the band was kicking some butt. Well, what an episode it has become. But it couldn't be different we visited 3 out of 5 Pentapolitana cities, and I think you noticed already, they were important, they were big and wealthy, so I guess it will come as no surprise that Europa Universalis recognized it. The 5th Slovak national idea is related to towns. So, to close the day, we thought, if we cannot live in a tower, maybe we can have dinner in one, and yes, we found a restaurant in a tower, which was great. And with this, let's say, tasty little detail, let us finish the episode. In the next, 2 more towns, but they are going to be connected to 2 groups of people. We're going to talk about Germans and Poles. And talking about Poles, there's going to be also a castle and royalty full on. So thank you very much for attention, and I will see you very, very soon.